Welcome to the Leadership Journal with your hosts, Nick Helgett and Robbie Woodard,
where we cover our journey, struggles, and obstacles that we have overcome, and moments in our careers that have led to growth. Here on Table Talk each week, where we break down various topics and journals of our trials and tribulations. All right, and we're back. All right, guys. So last episode on the Leadership Journal, we were talking about Leader Engagement Micromanagement Part 1, and we covered introduction in it, leader engagement versus micromanagement. We talked a lot about the pros and cons about leading, and then what micromanagement tendencies can do to teams, and what they can inspire, what they can detract from. But we're going to go a little bit further with that, because when we look at like leader engagement, the approach that involves motivating, inspiring, and involving team members in decision making versus micromanagement, which is control that is excessive, looking at minor details and then taking autonomy away from your teams. We're going to go further with that. Like we talked about pitfalls and understanding, but then like, what about comparing and contrasting them? What is that going to do?
Well, to kind of loop back to one of Jed's early points is, micromanagement gives you that short-term success in most cases, right? But what we're trying to, look at is how do you have that sustained success versus micromanagement? And so that's where a lot of those pitfalls came in and are, and being able to compare and contrast those things. But, there's going to be a balance, right? You have to find the dichotomy of it, right? You have to find where that balancing point is, and based on specific people's needs. Some people need a little bit more attention. And it's not to belittle them, it's to help keep them on track so that they can see what that kind of attention can blossom into, and like what their success is. So once they get a win, you might not have to give that person as much attention, because now they have a clear understanding of like, oh crap, like I can really do some good stuff here and maybe work my way into this position if I keep on this path,
So what you're saying is individual people have individual needs.
Correct.
You can't lead everybody the same way.
100%.
Okay. Anything you want to add to that, Jed, or?
Yeah, I think I did advocate in the last episode accidentally for micromanagement when I said that it can produce short-term success, and that it can be an easy fallback for managers or leaders who are used to that style, or maybe came up in their leadership journey under somebody who was a micromanager and they just need to get results. But I think you really hit on it, Nick, with the long-term success. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think there are a whole lot of businesses out there whose goal is to only be profitable for a couple of years. I mean, there's probably something out there where you just need to be super profitable for 3 or 4 years, and then you can shut the business down and do something else, probably something in the tech industry. I don't know. But I would say that the majority of places that most people work and that most of us have our leadership experience is going to be a place that's goal is to be around for a very long time, and to try to be successful for a very long time, way longer than we're going to be here, right? Longer than we're going to work for that company, maybe longer than we're going to be alive. And I think that's where micromanagement really fails. When you micromanage, you don't develop people to be successful. You just tell them what they need to do right now to be successful in this minute, but you don't teach them how to make decisions that will allow them to be successful. You don't teach them how to understand the business or the data, or to interact with people in a way that's going to make them be successful. You just give them marching orders. Do this right now, do this right now. And they become reliant on you for everything. And when you're gone, now there's a vacuum. Who's going to fill it? And, you might do, a lot of businesses will do that thing. They'll promote the next person up to that position, right? Someone who worked for you into your role. But that person's not prepared for it because you didn't give them what they needed to be prepared for it, because you didn't lead them, you didn't help them grow. You just day by day told them, this is what you're going to do today, this is what you're going to do this hour, this is what you're going to do this minute, in order to make these metrics work. And I think that's the big difference for me with micromanagement versus leadership. Leaders develop you into being able to take over their role when they leave, or whatever role it is that you want to be into. They help you grow and learn so that you're going to be successful on your own. To me, a good leader doesn't even need to be there at the end of the day. If you're doing your job, you should be able to leave and have no negative impact to the business. The next person should be prepared to step up, take your role, and start leading in the way that you led, and it should just take off. But micromanagers don't do that.
Yeah.
They have all the power, the authority, they make all the decisions, and then when they leave, there's a vacuum.
Yeah. Well, when you are so bent on making every decision for your team and every aspect of what they're going to do and how they're going to achieve the results, when you leave, the next person that comes in is either going to have a very tough time keeping your team moving forward, or they're going to thrive because their viewpoint's going to be complete 180, and the team is going to immediately buy in to someone who's willing to hear them out. If there's a cycle of always having, you're never heard, you're never talked to, you're talked at, you're never at the table with them, you're just a seat in an empty spot, that team is going to be so defeated. They're never going to want to succeed. They're not going to want to come to work. They're not going to want to do the best that they can. And then the moment that a true leader comes into that environment, it's as if it's a different team. But it's not a different team. It's the same team under the capabilities of someone who sees something that this team can achieve without having to change the team that they're leading. They're just using the team, or not using, they're leading and inspiring the team in a different light that says, you can succeed, I believe in you, and I'm not here to guide you all day long.
A thought just kind of popped into my head. I have a new supervisor. I have a new department leader, and one of the things that a point that he was making, which I understand the point he was making, but the terminology for me is hard for me to accept. Right? So, like he said, and on a technical level, he's right. But I just don't like the word. So he said, leadership is manipulation. You're manipulating people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've
been told that too, that as leaders, we are professional manipulators.
And on a technical level, that is true. But I choose to look at it as you are influencing somebody to reach a goal. Maybe on a technical level you are manipulating them in a certain way, but it's manipulation has such a negative connotation to it, and that was it's hard for me to get behind that word.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at, and I think for me, I can see where they're coming from as well, right? We've all heard it. And I'm not saying it's not true, but we've all heard that a key to leadership or being effective as a leader is to make people think something is their idea, right? To give them an instruction, but make them believe or feel that this was what they wanted the whole time, right? And I think that's probably what he's getting at. And I can understand what he's getting at. And if you can do that, that's probably a positive in the moment. If you have to make a change to make sure that let me go back. Let me walk that back a little bit. I think it's important, if you're going to make a change, that you involve those people who are best suited to make that decision, right? That decision rights that we talked about last time. And oftentimes that is the people doing the job. You need their input to be able to make a change in a way that will actually work, right? And you want your employees to be invested and to have ownership, and they can't do that if you're just telling them what to do all the time. So you do want to work with your employees in a way that they feel that they are owners as well, right? They are part of this decision-making process. But I don't think that necessarily has to be a manipulation. I think that, to me, the most effective way to do that is to actually have them be involved. And I think a good illustration of that is and I apologize because I heard this story on another leadership podcast, and I can't remember which one, and I can't remember who was speaking, so I can't give credit to the person. So I apologize. If you're listening to this and you're that person, I'm sorry. But it was a woman who was talking about the first time that she had a boss in a corporate job who was actually a leader, and she was telling the story of a time that they had this difficult decision to make as a team, and he brought everybody into this conference room, and he sat them all down, and he said, we have to make a change to meet this metric, to do something, and I need ideas, right? How are we going to do this? And I want everybody at the table to have an opportunity to tell me what they think we should do. And then he said, I may not choose your idea. That doesn't mean it was a bad idea. At the end of the day, I am the person who's responsible for making this decision, and I have to do what I think is going to be best for the team and the business. But I need everybody to tell me what they think the right thing is, so that I have all the information I need to make that decision. And I think that to me is maybe the difference there, right? That individual took all that information from the team. They were involved. They did have ownership, and he may not have chosen most of their ideas as that path forward, but they had a chance to make their voice heard and to be the ones who shaped the way that team was going to be going. And then he ultimately made that decision. Yeah. And I think that's he did it without, in my mind at least, without manipulating them into thinking that they had that decision, or they had a say. He actually gave them a say and then made his choice. So I can see where that individual's coming from, but I think that you're right. The manipulation part is maybe has the wrong connotations. You can give people ownership and have them be involved, and not necessarily be manipulating them.
Oh, excuse me. How I look at it is there's a difference between being a leader that sells people ideas and a leader that breeds ideas in their team.
Yep.
And if you're looking at it as being a manipulating kind of leader, you're selling ideas to your team, hoping that at some point they're going to buy in, they're going to do what you want. You're not opening up you're not going back to the pasture idea. You're not putting them out and saying, okay, give me your constraints, give me your abilities, give me what you need to succeed. You're saying, I'm giving you a checkbook, but there's actually in the background, there's a limit to how much I'm going to let you do.
So we talk a lot about, in my place of employment, we talk a lot about humility as a leader. And Brene Brown is an author that I just got introduced to, and I haven't had a chance to read much about. But how she got famous was talking about embracing vulnerability, which is, in my mind, the same thing as being humble and being vulnerable enough to say, I don't have the answer here, and I need to rely on your experience to make a decision that's going to benefit everybody, benefit the company, benefit ourselves on a personal level, and having that vulnerability to learn and being humble. But in future podcasts, I'd like to dive a little bit more into Brene Brown's her philosophies.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But that key point of being vulnerable and admitting that I don't have all the answers here, and it allow in that moment you're empowering your team to be like, oh, I've got a safe. It's safe for me to speak up and say, hey, I think this piece would add a lot of value here.
Yeah. And I think that's aligned with our discussion in the last episode about decision rights too. Just because I am the leader by position, by title, doesn't mean I'm the right person to make this decision on my own, that I have these decision rights.
Yeah. Well, when I think back to my first employer for better part of a decade, the first 5 years, I struggled to make myself known as a leader amongst my peers because I was not the high performer in getting Fred on the counter or getting relationships with peers or getting other aspects done. I stood out with project management and achieving results that no one had thought possible. one of the keystones that got me in my milestones to success was using my team and my ability to see challenges differently to help push something forward that no one else had thought about. And when we look at micromanagement and we look at leadership, we look at humility and then integrity, empowerment, and vulnerability. How do we put all of that together and say, this is where I succeeded? How can I replicate that in a different way that my team can learn from and not me take all the credit?
Yeah.
Like,
I do think maybe a topic for a future conversation, a future podcast may be something along those lines, right? I'm thinking back to my start as a peer leader as well. Years ago, I think I was similar, where I was new in a department, and like Nick had mentioned, right, I had a fresh perspective. I saw some things I thought we could do differently and maybe better. And I remember running some of those ideas through my leadership at the time and getting a lot of positive engagement there, right? Like, that's a great idea. Put something together. Let's talk about it. Let's try to roll something out to the team, see how it goes and see how it works. But like you also said in the last episode, Nick, sometimes those tenured people don't want to hear those ideas.
Yep.
And they don't want to do something differently for whatever reason. And so I saw process opportunities where we could do better, and I wanted to help the team as a whole improve. And so I tried to help fix some of those processes, and I met almost nothing but resistance from the rest of my team. Very few people were interested in trying something new. And all of that is to say that I think it may be worth having a discussion at some point about how do you get somebody on board who just doesn't want to be on board. And is there, philosophically speaking, right, is there a time and a place for micromanagement or for a command and control style of leadership? Is there a time and a place where you just have to tell somebody, I'm sorry, but this is just what you have to do?
Yeah, because sometimes their view doesn't align with either corporate values or what have you. Mm-hmm. And there's good reason to push back and say, that's probably not the direction we need to go.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you look at, like, there's the EPA, there's the there's the FDA, there's certain organizations that are baked in to policies that every organization has to abide by.
Sure.
And when we think about micromanagement, I'm okay with us following OSHA's requirements or like the FDA's food requirements or
Sure.
the EPA's environmental requirements, because the law says we have to do these certain things.
Yep.
But if it's not a set in stone, this has to occur, then how do you help somebody understand the positives and negatives behind something to be able to not micromanage them to where they can see the success without feeling like your thumb is on them?
And I understand the why, because immediately I started thinking of our safe quality food standards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our SQF standards. And, those are there because, we're creating a product that is, you're going to put it on your mouth. You're going to wipe,
Right.
you might put it on your face or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be safe. They need to be able to open that package. And right out of the gate of them opening that package, it has to be safe.
They have to trust the product and know that it is certified to be good. It has to be exactly what was committed by who you report to, whoever the entity is, that this is a trusted product.
And if the decision that hourly team member wants to make doesn't align with that and doesn't fall within those standards, and you have to resort to a little micromanaging to get them to understand, you have to give them more attention to get them to understand that we're doing this for a reason and it's a good reason.
Yeah. I think that's a hard line to walk as frontline leaders. Where's that balance between empowering your team to be successful on their own and just having to get results?
Well, I think
or having to bring one particular or a few particular individuals who want to dig their heels in and not progress with the rest of the team. dealing with that. And I get that that's also, that's a behavior issue.
Yep.
That maybe can be a little bit looked at a little bit differently, but
because sometimes usually at the end of the day, you may not be able to influence them in that direction. And that's where the unfortunate part of being a supervisor comes into play, where maybe they're not a fit for the company.
Sure.
Well, and the intention has to have the foundation of trust.
Yep.
You can have micromanager tendencies if your team trusts you and they understand why certain things have to be a particular way. And if you come out the gate where you don't trust, you don't show that you have the opportunity to fail successfully, then that is never going to be successful for you, no matter how hard you try. The 20% of your team, and I believe that's the statistic. Wow, words. I believe that's the statistic.
Words
I
are
can't
hard.
say that word for whatever reason.
Words are hard.
Where you have 80% of your team believes everything you say to them because you've given them the trust, you've given them the ability to see that what I say has value. I'm not dictating your job. I'm trying to help your job be successful.
Yep.
The other 20%, no matter how hard you try, there's going to be a flaw that they attach to.
Yep.
And they're not going to let that flaw go.
Yep.
And every time you try to do better, you can't influence that change in that person. Your 80% of your workforce that believes in you will be influencing that person.
Yep.
And then through trial and error, they are either a fit to be on your team,
Yep.
or they will work themselves out of your team.
And that 80% that trusts you is going to end up probably putting pressure on that person that doesn't want to conform to it.
Yeah.
And be like, come on, man, like we've got to do this, like, and if you've empowered your team appropriately, to have those decision rights to say, like, we have to adhere to these standards, then you're going to have help in that argument.
Sure. And I guess to be clear, I'm not talking as much about things like EPA, FDA, SQF requirements, right? Those are where there's a letter of the law. This is what you have to do, or else you will be fined, or else you're breaking the law, whatever the case may be, right? Or maybe even your operation will be shut down. I'm just thinking more along the lines of, say, instead of doing it the way we've always done it, we're going to switch to a slightly modified way because we believe that we can get more production out of the team that way.
Yep.
And most of the team is aligned and maybe even can show that that there are positive results from that. But then, you have, I guess to that point, that 20% of the team that just says, no, I've done this for 20 years. This is how I'm going to continue to do it. And I understand that that at some point becomes a performance issue that is may have to be addressed differently. But I guess my question is, in a situation like that, does micromanagement have a place in leadership at all? Right? We've talked a lot about the pros and cons, the pitfalls, but is there a time where to get through something when you have one or two people who are stuck in their ways, that micromanagement can be an effective way to bring somebody along?
I guess for me,
just curious what everyone's thoughts are on that. For
me, if you had asked me 10 years ago, the answer would be yes. Because that's where I was brought up. That's how I was shown. That was the authority that the world needed.
The term drive for results comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But when we look at the varying tenure, the varying age, or the generations that we have at play in the workforce right now, we have people that need to be told specific ways to do things. And then the opposite spectrum, given the ability to figure out how to fail and how to succeed. And then there's incremental differences between every age group from one end to the other. And if the person needs micromanagement because that's how they were raised in their career, then that's where the place belongs.
Yeah.
But if they were brought up in an environment in the new age of all of our current workforces where that has no place, your animosity multiplier is higher in this person that needs free will compared to somebody that comes to work to do what they're told.
Yep. And I do believe that it does have its place, because if there is a person on your team that you have to give that attention to, and you have to work with more closely to help move them in the right direction, they're also going to see that, well, team member A over here doesn't get that kind of attention, but boy, they do all these other things too. I guess I can see why there's a lot more trust over there. So if I do these things too, maybe I won't have this so much micromanagement.
Yeah, I could see, and the reason I asked the question is exactly that, right? If somebody's not able or willing to come along with the rest of the team when there's a change that needs to go into place, or when performance just needs to improve as a whole, I could see some value. I suppose essentially the way I'm thinking about it in my head seems essentially like a performance improvement plan, right? Of telling somebody, you're not meeting our expectations, and we've tried some things and it's not working. So what I'm going to do is strategically micromanage you for a short period of time so that you can build these habits that you need to build to be successful, with the goal of me backing off over a period of time and giving you back that freedom and to make your own decisions once you've made the progress we need you to make. Yep.
That's part of building trust.
But on the other hand, to your point, right? If someone's seeing, if you don't have that conversation with somebody and you just micromanage somebody because they are not performing, but you don't have that discussion, I could see them becoming resentful of the attention that you're paying them that other person is not getting. Why am I always on that person's radar instead of, why is Jim never the one in trouble when I'm, or not in trouble? Why is Jim never being micromanaged, but I'm always being micromanaged?
Yeah.
So
that takes me back to experiences that I've had where I can see a peer who wasn't doing nearly what they needed to do for their job to succeed. My roles, my experiences, my results were vastly improved in various areas that they were showing no willingness to dive in various workplaces, but I had all the heat. I look at relationships that I've had with my boss. Now, frontline leadership is unique because hourly supervisors, hourly leaders have a different perspective. And I can say this to Nick because Nick was my hourly supervisor before he stepped up to the current role, as he called it the big boy club when he first moved into it.
I did say that.
When you go from being an hourly supervisor, once you make that step into being a salaried leader, the world doesn't change. Your perspective is now all of a sudden different because you are more open to different levels that you were never exposed to. Yep. There's conversations that aren't had with hourly supervisors that are much more intense or much more direct to the salaried frontline supervisors.
Yes.
And it's the salaried supervisor's job to filter all that information as carefully down as possible through their leadership style to continue to have the influence over their team without detracting from the relationship they're building with their boss.
And boy howdy, I can say from a personal experience, it's really hard coming from an hourly position, even though that hourly position wasn't with the company that I'm at now, to toe that line and not just be way too transparent with your hourly folks, because I can relate to their frustration, right? I can see it because I've been that guy before. I've been that person before that's struggled with this similar thing and held that same frustration because I didn't understand why. And now it's my job to articulate that why in an appropriate way and not feed into that negativity or not feed into that frustration and try to bring that different perspective to alleviate frustration. And that's a hard line to walk coming from such a long-term hourly person.
And I think that's ultimately where like long-term versus short-term success comes from, is being that frontline leader who has total ownership of hourly supervisors, hourly team members that has to report to 3 different worlds at all times. Like I said in the first episode, or episode 0, you manage 3 worlds all day long. Your hourly workforce that sees you daily, your executive leadership, whether at your level or above, and then your personal space.
Yes.
And if you can't balance all 3 of those, the stress, the anxiety, the discomfort, the resentment towards any of those, once it starts bleeding into all areas, you start to lose the ability to be an engaged leader, because it's hard to separate the positivity from the negativity. And I've been in that spot, and it's not a fun spot to be in anywhere. And staying an engaged leader helps you be sustainable in the long run. But let me ask you, Nick, before I ask Jed, as this is your first 2 years as a salaried frontline leader, is there anything you would do differently to focus on sustained success and engagement versus how you originally thought you were going to succeed?
Being better at explaining the bigger picture, the why behind a change is coming down the pipeline, or why we have to evolve as an organization to continue to be profitable and relevant in the market, and not fall into, well, this sucks. Mm-hmm. This situation sucks, and fall into that pitfall of, I get why they're mad, and now I'm mad. And having to, detach from my emotion about the situation and try and look at the bigger picture, and then articulate and explain that bigger picture to my team. That's probably been the most difficult thing for me.
Yeah, I think I can see where you're coming from, for sure, and I can relate to what you were saying about being in a leadership position where you're so imbalanced that it's hard to see the positive for all the negatives. I mean, I've been in that spot for sure, where my job has taken over my life, and I have no balance, not just work life, but even at work amongst the things I need to do. I'm reminded of my previous role as a client manager once. One of my portfolios that I oversaw was going through a rough time with staffing, and was making it difficult to deliver on our promises to our client. And I had a good relationship with these clients, and they were pretty understanding. But it was a bigger account than just me. I wasn't the only person in that portfolio. It was a national account. And so while the client was very understanding and it wasn't impacting our relationship, it was something that the national account leadership took they saw it very differently. And that's understandable. Their perspective was different than mine. And so I was routinely micromanaged through that process of fixing that account, of making that staffing situation better, to the extent that I had hour-long meetings every single day with the client and the national accounts team, as well as my direct supervisor at the time.
It sounds intense.
Every day, every weekday, we had an hour set aside to talk about the progress we had made since the previous day towards increasing the staffing situation at that client's location.
And until you've been in that situation, you can't understand that pressure.
Mm-mm. It was very high pressure. There were a lot of tough questions that were asked. I had to eat a lot of crow several times. I mean, there were a lot of times that we just didn't make the progress we needed to make, and trying to balance, getting that portfolio where it needed to be versus the 49 other portfolios I was responsible for managing. Yeah. was hard, and being micromanaged through that process, not being trusted that I was doing the right things to make it better, was hard. And it put me in a really negative headspace. So
did you carry...
I realized I didn't answer your question, but...
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead and finish your thought here. Well, I was just kind of curious. Did that negativity, that pressure, that, you know, I think you put, you know, kind of lack of balance in your job. Did that carry over to your new role at all?
You know, it definitely, I will say it took me some time to, for lack of a better word, recover from that environment. That role was one where there was a lot of micromanagement, very little, almost no praise for doing well, and constant criticism for the things that were not right. It was one where even when things were going well and you know, we were meeting metrics, we had the same meeting 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, to discuss the same metrics. And then we had modified meetings Tuesday and Thursday that were basically the same thing, just a little bit shorter, to go over the same things. And so every single day we looked at the same metrics and said, well, how is this different from yesterday? And that was the time span we were working on, right? Was this number, right? Say we're looking at our hiring metrics, right? This number, you've got X number of candidates in the pipeline who are waiting to go through orientation today. So how many of them are in orientation? So then on Monday, right? So then Tuesday comes and the question is, well, how many of them are in orientation now today on Tuesday? And then with those people in orientation, how many people do you have that are going to be able to do orientation on Thursday?
Dang.
Right. And that was the way that we were managed as a crew, all the client managers and our operations managers after that. That was how we were managed. Was today, it's Monday. How many people did you hire? How many applications did you get over the weekend that you went through today and got calls and interviews done and got people in the pipeline? And then how many people are going to be in orientation tomorrow? And then how many people are going to be in the class on Wednesday? And then how many people will be in orientation on Thursday? And every single day we would look over that. And if somebody from Monday wasn't in orientation by Thursday, then you had to answer why. Why is that person not in orientation already?
So what would you do differently having gone through that experience? Is there anything that you think you could have changed about how you approached or entered into a different environment with that experience being had?
Yeah. So I think, you know, going into my current role, like I said, there was a lot to unlearn, and a lot to adjust to, because the environment that I'm in now is a lot more trusting. There's a lot more emphasis on, we believe in hiring the right people and letting them do what they need to do. And then having that engagement, checking in on people, making sure they're doing okay, they're getting what they need, and that they're growing, but largely letting you do your own thing. And so I think the big thing is when you hire somebody who's new and you don't know where they come from, or just in general with any of your employees, right? You have to have those regular touch points.
Yes.
Yep.
And I was so overwhelmed from my previous role with all those things that I failed for quite a while in my new role, having those touch points with my employees. I was better with some than others, especially the more tenured employees who had the knowledge that I didn't have, because I relied on them to help me make the decisions we needed to make, right? Somebody would say, we need to improve this metric, we need to do better in this area. And so I would go straight to some of these people who've been around a while and say, hey, you know, we're looking at these things. I think we can do a little bit better. How do you think we can get there? But having those outside of those, just having regular, how are you doing? How's your job? What do you need from me? Kind of conversations were something I was not good at because I couldn't do them in my previous role. I did not have the bandwidth.
So all of that just feels like the environment you were in really led to a lot of toxic behaviors because they didn't leave room for positivity.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. My leadership style in that job was completely command and control, because at the end of the day, I had to keep clients. If I didn't keep clients, we lost money.
Well, and it was command and control because that was where they were making you lead the exact way that they were leading you. and not allowing room for growth.
And it was also an environment where I had to lead remotely for a lot of people. And so it's difficult to establish those relationships with somebody who's 400 miles away from you or more that directly reports to you. It can be really hard. And so there was a lot of, hey, the client wants this, so this is what we're going to do now. Right? Just this is how we're going to do this. This is what the client wants. So do exactly that. Because when you don't, then there are complaints. And when there are complaints, you lose money.
Well, that transfers right over into what we do now. You know, if our customer that we supply in our manufacturing environment is not happy with what we're doing, then we have to come back to our teams and say, look, they're not happy. We have to make changes. And those that transparency is
absolutely. And I've had that conversation with my team and my current role where we've all gotten together and said, hey, you know, we got some feedback from our customer. It's not where we want it to be. Yep. Here's what we're being told. Here's what we're seeing.
And that's not a fun conversation.
It's not a fun conversation. But like we said in the last episode, I think that transparency is important.
Yep.
And then working through it together.
Because that really highlights
how are we all going to fix this problem.
So, and I think that bridges the gap between when is micromanagement okay and how do we lead through stuff. The micromanager wouldn't give the why, wouldn't give the, hey, these are the issues that were brought up. Instead, it would just be, this is the change and here's how we're going to get there.
Yeah, we need to do better in this area. So we're going to do these things to get better.
Yeah. And you better do it.
And the leaders to be engaged with the teams, they're going to have the transparency. Now they're going to have the filtered message with their team. We're not going to say everything that was said to us, because in no world is it okay to say certain words that are tossed at frontline leaders that are at that direct level of like the things that the harsh statements, the harsh statements that we get delivered. If we said it to our teams, that would spur more negativity.
Yep.
But if we can filter that appropriately, we can reword that message and we can cater it to the people that we have built those relationships with. The effective result we're going to get is going to be that much better because the why, the how, and the investment in being successful for recurring growth is the important step there. Yeah. So I think that in my perspective, micromanagement lacks communication, whereas leadership is fully about communication.
Yeah. I think if you have to micromanage a person or situation just to get quick results right now, because that's what's expected of you, I think what's important is communicating to those individuals, this is why you have to do that, right? Because we've had those kinds of things too, where as a team, we've had to say, hey, you know, our customer is coming tomorrow to inspect our environment and we're in a pretty good spot, but we really need to impress the pants off these folks.
We have to put our best foot forward.
We have to put our best foot forward. So for the next 2 shifts, the next 24 hours, the next however period of time, I'm going to be giving a lot of specific instructions. And, you know, if it's wrong, please tell me or give me feedback. But at the end of the day, we just need to make this happen, right? It's only for this period of time. And it's only because we're kind of in emergency status. We want to make sure we're going to get everything perfect. So I'm going to switch to command and control for the next couple days to get through this situation because it really matters. Well, like this is extra important. But the point is, I suppose that we've communicated, hey, we're not going to lead you guys the way we've been leading. And it's not because what we're doing was not the right way. The situation has changed and that situation calls for something a little bit different.
I look back at when I was first promoted to being assistant manager for my first company. There was a lot of emphasis all the time about, oh my God, the headquarters team is coming into our store. We need to make sure that we have everything zoned. We have everything lined out. We have everything stocked. We have everything perfect for this visit that comes twice a year. And not the highest executive in the company, but someone who's 4 steps higher than me. He was my boss's boss's boss. And I saw him as a true leader because when what he said to me rang true, the more and more I worked in various stores. I worked in 7 stores over 10 years. saw a lot of different environments, and I led through 5 of them, and I was a team member in 2 of them. The words have always stuck with me. And in an average store, you have 4,000 visits a day. The visit is your customer.
Mm-hmm.
If we're focused on 10 people coming into your store twice a year, you have a lot more visits from someone more important every day than these 2 people. So why would you spend all of your time impressing somebody that doesn't matter? And when I think about that and I look at all the leaders that I have had that focus on their boss coming into the store or their boss's boss coming into the store, they go into a frenzy, they go into a panic because that person that they report to is a micromanager.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at leaders coming in the building, the atmosphere is different. The team feels it. The customers even feel it. Like when there's a leader that walks into a store that's not from your store, they're from the market team and they're a market leader, they're more engaged with your customers than you are because they're more invested in your customers than you are because they are the reason that they have their job. Not because you are the reason they have their job, it's because they've made them successful. And when your store leader feels the same as that market leader, it cascades down to you. And there's a couple stores I've worked in where the teams were so defeated because management teams were in and out within 6 months. The volatility rating that they called it was so high that the teams needed something positive to attach to. And when I took that example from one store to another and helped that store focus on the immediate visits that they had every day, we saw some positivity growing because it no longer became about what my boss wanted. It became about who actually paid our bills and what they wanted. And I think that's the ultimate focus.
Yeah.
Tangent, I know.
No,
Sorry.
you're good. I would say this is just my opinion, so take it for whatever it's worth. I think that, and it's not related to our topic, I suppose, so it's just a tangent, but I think that I always hesitate whenever I hear any leadership say, oh, it's about the customer. Because it is, right? At the end of the day, we need our customers to be successful. And we do want to serve the needs of the customer. But I think as leaders, our primary responsibility is to our employees before the customer.
Well,
if we're doing the right things for and by our employees, then the customer will be taken care of. But I think a lot of businesses get so focused on they need to get people in the door, they need the customers to buy things, that we start to focus on those results instead of the employees. And then we do get the employees who are burned out and depressed because they don't matter, right? They can tell that they are not a priority for their leadership or for their company. It's all about the customer. And I think that I think we've all been in that situation where you hear about the customer, you hear about the guest, and everything you do, think about the guest, even as far up as supply chain, unloading a truck in a warehouse. Well, how's what you're doing impacting the guest? And, let's be honest, when you're doing that, I don't care about the guest. I'm breaking my back throwing these boxes for 12 hours all day. I'm not concerned about the guest. I need to know what the company is doing for me. And when the company treats me, gives me what I need to thrive in this role, then the guest will be taken care of, right? Then you take more care with the boxes, you work a little bit harder, a little faster because you're able to, and you feel good about doing it. But when everyone just says, well, we got to do better for the customer, let's be honest, most of us have jobs because we need to pay our bills, not because we care about the customer.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the most basic level. So I think part of getting people invested in the business is it needs to be about them, not just about the customer. And if we make it about them, then the customer will get what they want.
Mm-hmm. Well,
because then they will want to take care of the customer, but we have to take care of them first.
Yeah, and when I look back at what I was elaborating on, there are a lot of times where the store managers would call extra overtime, would call in people off their days off, calling all the support from different stores coming in support.
Sure.
Just to polish up something, but what they were forgetting was that person had this shift that they needed to take care of. Now they're across the store doing something else, and they care about the area that they own that's getting neglected, or their customer that's getting neglected because they enjoy doing what they're doing, or the different teams that are, instead of having 2 days off or 3 days off, they now have 1 day off, and they have to do all this extra time. They're feeling more burnout just to impress one person. But if we go back to basics and we look at having a job here to do a purpose, the customer will feel the impact. If we focus on people being able to accomplish what they came in to do, ultimately we do take care of the customer.
Yeah. And Simon Sinek, actually, I just saw a bit on LinkedIn where he was talking about this exact thing, and that
doesn't surprise me.
It really,
I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, so I'm not surprised at all that he's talking about these same things.
Right, like and everything you said basically it was in that bit that I watched of his, and it reigns to be very true. So kind of recapping here things that we've been talking about here. It's really important to choose the right leadership style, and that engagement versus micromanagement. I mean, it's such a broad topic, but there is times when micromanagement is effective, right? Mm-hmm. But that, I guess the underlying point is that can't be the one tool in your bag in your belt. Like that's,
in my mind, it should be the last resort.
Yep. Yes. And so,
in case of emergency, break glass.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
it's the fire extinguisher of leadership.
Yeah.
And just, kind of anybody that is listening to this that is looking to be in a leadership role, or is currently in a leadership role, that's wanting to improve and learn more, to reflect on your own leadership practices, and really consider how you do things on a day-to-day basis, and analyze what you do to help you grow. And I think this has been a great exercise, sharing our experiences, and between the two and what we've experienced, how we've chosen to manage in certain moments. Mm-hmm. And that it's kind of funny how some of those choices that you make, and how you influence your peers and yourself as a leader, and how that it transfers over into your personal life even too, and how you kind of conduct yourself on a day-to-day basis with your family, with the general public, those kinds of things. But I think in conclusion, it's leadership is it's ever changing. That no 2 days are going to be the same. And every situation is going to be, you might have seen this before, but it's going to be slightly different. And so it's so good to reflect on your experiences, to learn what you could have done better, but next time, because it's your ownership is your team. Your ownership is your piece of that business, and trying to make the business successful. Mm-hmm. So what, do you have any closing thoughts, you guys, on
you want to go first, Jed?
Sure. I think, I guess my closing thought is just that, like you said, we've kind of talked about different styles of leadership here and there, things we've been through, things we've learned. And I think the big thing is that leadership is a journey. We've all got various levels of experience, a number of years, types of positions, industries, things like that sitting here. And I'm sure anyone listening has even more significantly different backgrounds than we do, and levels of experience, different kinds of leadership. And that just because we're sitting here having the podcast doesn't mean that we think we're done. We have a lot to learn. We're learning every day. It's a never ending journey of improvement.
The moment that you feel like you've mastered leadership, don't even say it, because every person that wakes up the next day has something else to learn.
Yeah.
I remember reading once, and I couldn't tell you where. It was probably a little Facebook blurb or something like that. Who knows? Just years and years ago. That the minute you stop learning is the minute you become dumb.
Yep.
And that's stuck with me for my whole life.
The person that seeks continuous knowledge is the person that is most successful. And the leaders that are most connected to their teams seek to learn something from their team each and every day. They're surprised by what they can learn when their mind is open to the opportunity to understand something differently. And the moment your mind is closed, you're no longer a leader, you're a manager. And as long as you can hang on to that, and you can just continue to be on the journey that we've been on and we're continuing to be on, then you're going to be successful. And just remember that the three worlds really can dictate your mood, but once you take control of your own space and you're able to filter from the executive world to the frontline world and have your own balance, that's where you'll be successful as a leader.
I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope to have you back, Jed.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on your podcast these last couple episodes.
Yeah, I think we can learn a lot from each other, and I think that's the point of the journal, and that's a point of journaling yourself. Like I've been told countless times over my 43 years is, write it down. You learn something, write it down. Because that's a lesson that you can fall back on, and I think that's the point here. But I very much have enjoyed this conversation, and hope to have more in the future.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Appreciate you listening in. Give us a follow, give us a like, whatever it is that you want to do to stay engaged with us and keep track of our podcast, because there'll be more to come in this journal about leadership here on Table Talk. So have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.